We'll start our questions with Ms. Dancho. Ms. Dancho, please go ahead. 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay? Just making sure this works. Thank you, Minister, for being here, and thank you for your opening kind words. I appreciate that. As we know, we have a very serious situation on our hands, Minister. That's the reason that you are here. Your government has allowed 3 alleged terrorists into our country through the immigration streams that came ultimately from what we've learned from the RCMP through Globe and Mail reporting, came within hours of murdering an untold number of innocent people, Canadians and Americans, in the latest alleged terrorists that's been gained entry into Canada under immigration streams under your watch, sir. And unfortunately, though it's been several weeks since the first 2 and a few weeks since the second iteration, we've yet to find out how this has happened. And to my knowledge, you've made no commitments of how you're going to fix it and prevent it from happening again. What we do know and understand is that your government in the past has directed public servants to fast-track immigration procedures, to cut some corners, bring in people as quickly as possible. And now we have a situation where we have 3 alleged terrorists on our hands, so it is reasonable to believe there could be more. So what specific steps have you taken the past few weeks to ensure no more alleged terrorists can gain entry to Canada through our immigration streams?
Thank you for the question, MP Dancho. As you know, there are a number of elements about this case that I cannot discuss publicly. I would also not assume a number of facts that are not in evidence currently, but again, we take these incidents very, very seriously. I announced in the French portion of my speech that we should come up with a result of our internal investigation within the next 2 weeks. Again, those will be made public. I think the discussion here is to see if and when there was any deficiency, if there was one, whether it is one that is systematic, and then how you then remedy that. What we will disclose to you in the next 2 weeks, obviously we can't disclose today, the investigation is not complete.
So just to confirm, though, you haven't
to
taken any measures to change any procedures whatsoever?
Again,
nothing has changed?
As I've said to you, we're currently investigating if and when there were any deficiencies and what measures need to be taken.
With my knowledge of immigration, the procedures are already known. In fact, your department has provided a list of how the procedures are undertaken. So to me, it's very clear, if you can follow the trail over the last number of years, you should be able to determine how it is, for example, that the fact that we weren't able to determine there was a 2015 ISIS video where one of the alleged terrorists was dismembering a prisoner back in 2015 that was circulating the internet, and yet 3 years later he gained entry into Canada and in fact went through 6 different immigration streams since that time and ultimately gained Canadian citizenship. And in that time, there were 4 red flags flagged for that individual. 3 of them were risk indicators. Obviously, none of them were taken seriously, or not to the extent that he was not allowed to continue down the immigration streams. What I did find interesting, though, Minister, is that in 2018, your government removed the requirement for police background checks, or officially called police clearance certificates, from the country of origin, from countries like Pakistan, and Pakistan ultimately is a bit of a high-risk country, to say the least, so it is puzzling that that was done in 2018. This security check was removed, and now we know a student visa from Pakistan gained entry into Canada. Have you reinstated this security requirement, for example? That is an easy step that you could have taken by now.
Again, currently, you know that this individual was an asylum seeker. You know, again, that there are differences with respect to different requirements for and the reliability of police certificates at different stages. They vary in
excuse
their
me,
quality.
sorry, I may have misspoke, but I'm talking about the student visa from Pakistan, the latest alleged terrorist, not the son, but the student visa from Pakistan.
Again, and this may be within or not within the scope of this discussion, Mr. Chair. Again, the person, the latest alleged individual, came in as a student from Pakistan.
Correct.
Again, the details that you have in your chronologies are the ones that I'm at liberty to speak to at this time.
Thank you, Minister. But I'm asking specifically about how in 2018 your government removed the requirement for police clearance certificates, ultimately police background checks from the country of origin, from countries like Pakistan. Now we have a student visa holder from Pakistan who did not receive the police assuming he did not receive the police clearance certificate, unless you can correct me, but that requirement was removed in 2018. So there was a security check removed. That requirement was removed in 2018 from Pakistan for student visa holders. Now we have a situation where your government's brought in a student visa holder from Pakistan who's alleged to be a terrorist. He was on his way to Brooklyn, New York, to massacre Jews. And there was a situation where there could have been an additional level of screening that your government removed in 2018. So have you reinstated the security requirement? I'm hearing that you have not done that. I do feel that that's something quite easy that you could do that could provide another layer of security, so this doesn't happen again.
Again, we rely
Is that
on
not
our,
reasonable?
we rely on our security partners to advise us as to the risk profile to take with respect to these
It's just a common sense
individuals.
approach, though, is it not?
Again, you're assuming the reliability and the validity of police certificates.
I
When our
appreciate that, but for permanent
screening process
residents
is a
from,
lot more
from permanent
comprehensive.
Point of
residents
order.
from Pakistan.
Again,
Thank you, Chair. The practice here is that a question is asked and there's sufficient time for the minister to answer. I would ask that that rule be in place so that we can actually hear the answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. O'Connell. Let's let the minister answer the question.
we are confident in the progressive nature of the screening process. Police certificates can
I do
be
have to
requested.
interrupt. He has said something that's incorrect. Permanent residents from Pakistan are required to provide
Point of
police
order.
certificates.
Ms. O'Connell on point of order.
Mr. Chair, that's not how this works. The questioner asks the question. The witness has the time to answer regardless of the opinion of Ms. Dancho. So I'd ask that you implement the rules that we all operate under.
I would agree with Ms. O'Connell on this point. If we could just let the minister answer.
Perhaps he can answer my question on permanent residents.
Who's posing the questions or giving the
May
testimony, but I'm glad
may I
to finish
pose
my
the question, then he can finish, and then we're done? I'd appreciate that. I'm sorry, are you the chair? I didn't know.
So
Are
your-
you?
Your time
Are
is
you
up.
the
That's not
chair?
how this works.
Are you
Hold
the
it.
chair?
Can we avoid like crosstalk? So I'm sorry, your time is up. We'll go now.
No, I
to-
have 11 seconds left, Chair.
Can we hear the answer,
I have
perhaps?
11 seconds
I have
left.
3 seconds left.
All right, on permanent residents, are they required for police security checks from Pakistan, yes or no?
as a matter of
Mr.
course,
Manson.
yes.
Yes, they are. Okay, exactly.
Can we hear the answer?
Yeah.
He did answer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there were a cascade of questions there, Chair. What I would say
One.
is that we are confident in our security screening and the progressive nature of them. We believe that the biometrics that every single student needs to submit with very few restrictions give us the confidence we have, and the officers in question can ask for police certificates. Again, there are questions around the validity and the reliability of
required.
those certificates.
Okay, thank you. We go now to Ms. Zaid. Ms. Zaid, 6 minutes, please.
Chair, and thank you, Minister, for coming on this important issue. Before I get to my questions, I just want to say that I'm very concerned about the rhetoric we saw from some of my conservative colleagues in the last meeting we had on this issue. This is a very serious issue, and all Canadians want us to get answers on the security processes that are in place for people who are seeking to come to Canada. But as leaders, we also have a responsibility to choose our words carefully. While we do our work, we must be careful not to cast aspersions on all immigrants or all Canadians from minority communities. Conservative members even sought to tie these cases to the Syrian refugee program, which they know is false. We must not fuel online hatred that too often becomes real world violence. I came to this country as an immigrant to build a better life for my children. In few days, it will be 25 years for me here, because Canada is welcoming and a land of opportunity. So have many other people. Canadians from minority groups are too often the target of racism and discrimination. I ask that we keep that in mind during this study. Coming to questions, Minister, my first question is, Minister, can you please outline the specific screening measures currently in place to prevent individuals with extremist ties from entering Canada? So can you please elaborate on the portion of this security screening that the IRCC is responsible for, and what happens if IRCC does identify risk indicators on an application?
Chair, point of order, please.
Down, point of order.
Thank you. I purposely waited until my colleague was done her question. Could we please get clarification on your ruling about the time to answer? I thought the time allotted to the member is their time to speak and use as they wanted. Would you please make a ruling on the time to answer the question so we don't keep arguing about that going? We had discussions about this last time, many times. Could we get a ruling from you? I don't believe it's in the standing orders that you have to give the same time to answer is due to ask a question. Could you make a ruling on that, please, Chair?
What is that?
So my general practice is to give the witness a chance to answer. If you run out of time right at the end of your 6 minutes, I will generally give the witness, whomever it is, an opportunity to answer whatever question was last posed. I will hold the members to their 6 minutes or whatever the time frame is in the particular instance. Within that rubric, it is your time. However, it is, I think, Standing Order 18, as a matter of respect, to give people their, an opportunity to respond properly to the questions you ask. So I will try to adhere to that as well. So we're looking for fairness, a fair question, fair response, and if a question is asked, the witness should be able to answer the question to as best of their ability.
Okay.
Okay, Ms. Said, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I asked the question, so Minister respond. Yeah.
And through you, I would echo the sentiments of MP Zaid. We would not want aspersions cast on the entire Pakistani community because of the alleged actions of one or other individuals or the Egyptian community for that matter. And it would be lamentable for that to be the case. This is a question of some detail, so I will pass over the rest of my time to Aisha Zafar to answer that. Salma. You're good.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair, and through you, Minister Miller. So the security screening process is a trilateral program. IRCC definitely is the first line where we look at individuals before they enter Canada. We screen 100% of all applicants who come into Canada. We have these risk indicator packages, which we did talk about before. Happy to go into further detail on those. Those risk indicator packages are not only for individuals who may be engaged in terrorism. They refer to all serious inadmissibilities in IRPA. So that would include our security inadmissibilities, such as terrorism being a danger to the security of Canada, someone who may have engaged in acts of violence that would threaten Canadians, but also espionage and subversion of a government, for instance. Other serious inadmissibilities include human or international rights violations, war crimes, or organized or serious crime. So the risk indicators cover all of what we call serious inadmissibilities, of which terrorism might be one. Our officers are trained on the risk indicator packages if they do notice a risk indicator on an application. And again, that risk indicator is like a clue for the officer that there might be more investigation that needs to be done. They will refer it to CBSA and CSIS for comprehensive security screening. Once CBSA and CSIS complete their screening, they will provide back to IRCC a recommendation from a security screening perspective. So that recommendation will either be favorable, which means they have not identified a serious inadmissibility. It will be non-favorable, which means they have, or it could be inconclusive. That inconclusive would require the officer to gather more information until they could be satisfied and make a final determination. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zafar. So it would be right to say that IRCC is responsible for identifying risk indicators, and in case, at that point, it is passed to Canada Security Services?
Thank you for the question. So IRCC has risk indicator packages that are developed by CBSA and CSIS. The officer is responsible to determine whether or not a referral for a comprehensive security screening is required, and then the IRCC officer is responsible for the final decision on that application.
What steps are being taken to ensure that violent extremists, particularly those linked to international terror organizations, do not exploit our immigration system?
Just before I answer that question, I do want to say for the record that the individuals in question had no connection to the Syrian refugee program. Just if you look at the timeline, it's nonsensical that they would be connected to it, so it was quite obvious if people had examined the chronology in detail. I think what has been stressed, and particularly in testimony that was given to members here by Minister LeBlanc, is the tight, intimate cooperation, security sharing, and discipline that we have with our security partners, most notably Five Eyes, and our ability to seamlessly get information and act on it quickly. the confidentiality and the trust in partners is also capital. The resources within each member that comprises the Five Eyes and our other partners is key to acting quickly. And in this case, things worked and our security agencies worked, and for that I thank them. There is a reason why we have sort of a threefold approach to security in this country, outside the country, at the border, and inside. And in this case it worked, and we should be quite proud of it.
Thank you, Ms. Said. On y va maintenant, Madame Michaud. Madame Michaud, allez-y.
Ms. Michaud, you have the floor. 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Minister, for being here. Your presence is appreciated. Welcome back, Ms. Dencho. Unfortunately, I missed some meetings on this topic, so I wonder if the issues I'll be raising have been addressed already. Mr. Minister, you said that today's discussion is to identify some of the feelings in your department when it comes to the process. When I look at the chronology of events, we do see that there were risk indicators at some point. In my opinion, these are the types of red flags that are raised in an immigration process, but there was no thorough investigation that was done, even though risk indicators had been flagged. So as we heard, when there's a risk indicator, there should be an investigation, and apparently this was not the case on several occasions on this file. When you look at this chronology of events, do you see these elements as failings? Should there have been investigations, thorough investigations at some point? There was more than one risk indicator on several occasions. That should be a red flag. So what do you think when you look at the chronology of events today? That's a very important question. You will be receiving our findings in a few weeks when it comes to the internal review to find out whether there were any failings. They might have been systemic failings, and then we'll see what to do. Secondly, it's important to say that a red flag is not a terrorist indicator. It could be something that could be resolved. And it could turn out not being a risk per se. What I do know is that the officers who took the decision did not have the information required at that time, indicating that that person should be deemed inadmissible. I cannot question the conclusion they arrived at, but we are here for a reason, and that is why we are carrying out this internal review, and that is why my deputy minister is undergoing the review, and we're taking it very seriously. Thank you. I noticed something else that is important. Normally, when we look at immigration processes in Canada, someone outside Canada requests a visitor visa and then gets to an entry point. Most of the time, will that person immediately ask for asylum, or can the person request asylum a few months later when their visitor visa expires? What is the process for such visas? The norm in mathematical terms is that most people come here for tourism or for the reasons presented to the government and to the officers. Amongst those who request asylum, there are certain practices we've noticed, be it at the airport or these days we're seeing people seeking asylum at Pearson or at the Trudeau airports. It's not systematic that they immediately ask for asylum. You've heard the case of students who come here as student visas and seek asylum after a few months upon reflection. And sometimes it's cause for concern when someone asked for asylum a few months after, but we live in a system of law and the people are entitled to do so. In terms of trends, the trend now is for people seeking asylum from within the country. So they get in with one visa, and increasingly they seek asylum, maybe because they find themselves in a precarious situation, their visa is expiring, or any other reason, but that's the trend that is increasing these days. Thank you. I'm asking that question because you're saying that it's maybe cause of concern when somebody asks for asylum a few months later, and in this case, the person did not seek asylum at Pearson Airport. I talked with my colleague who works at immigration, or who has more information than me, and this person said, looking at the chronology, it would have been the red flag to find out why the person was seeking asylum a few months later. So I don't know if you could give us an answer. In your department, did it raise eyebrows in your department? I know you're particularly interested in this case. When you look at the chronology of events after the fact, between the time the person arrived and the time the person sought asylum, is there something that could have been done? Normally, the refugee board takes a decision, and it's part of human behavior. The people who study the files look at the context in which the application was made, and these could be the reasons for the decision. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. McGregor, go ahead, please. 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for appearing before our committee today to help us answer some questions on this particular and very serious situation. Similar to what was just asked you with respect to the chronology, and I know you are awaiting an internal investigation, but I'm curious, when you have your conversations with Minister LeBlanc in his role as Minister of Public Safety, and you look at these timelines, and, thank God CSIS and the RCMP and the CBSA acted when they did. The fact that these individuals were apprehended, that they are in custody, I guess to some extent shows that the system worked. But when you're having your conversations with Minister LeBlanc, there's also the fact that they got into Canada. So when you're taking the totality of that chronology and the fact that it did end in a success, are you satisfied that the system worked? Are you satisfied that this is an overall success? Or can you opine for the committee on what your initial findings are between you and the minister?
Look, the responsibility that Minister LeBlanc and I have is almost unimaginable. At times, we are privy to information that most Canadians aren't, related to the national security of our country. So I'm obviously never satisfied. I am happy of the men and women in uniform that were able to apprehend these individuals. And we're able to act quickly on the information that was shared with them, like they do when they share information with people abroad about activities that they may come under their eyes. Again, we can't speak to it, but clearly, when we do see a chronology like this, when we are imparted with the information that we are in a confidential, secret basis, we do ask a number of questions. We don't simply take stock in the fact that these people were caught. We look at the process and what went right, what could have gone wrong. Again, it requires facts, and hyperbole is fine, but it doesn't solve the problem. And there's no magic wand in this case to apprehending an individual. It's multi-layered. Ideally, you apprehend people before they even come into the country, assuming there's no activities that turn them into different people in the country. And these are all assumptions that we have to deal with. And to get to the heart of that, we actually have to get the facts. MP McGregor.
And are you finding, these individuals are obviously motivated by an ideology to commit these crimes. They were in advanced stages of planning in some cases. But overall, is your government finding that this radicalization is happening abroad, or is it happening after they've come to Canada, or is it a bit of both? Is there anything you could speak to on that? Because I think de-radicalization efforts are also an important part of the parcel here.
say, speaking very generally, it's probably a bit of both. We shouldn't think that radicalization doesn't occur in Canada. Terrorist networks, criminality networks work together, and they use these as tools to perpetrate horrible crimes on innocent people. And we've seen increased hate, anti-Semitic, Islamophobic hate, particularly in the current context. And that does impact behavior, sometimes of younger cohorts of the population as well, as we've seen in some other apprehensions. And so, to answer your question quite succinctly, a little bit of both.
Yeah, and I just want to get one more question, if I can. I mean, I think you're lucky that I'm speaking to you here today, not the person who does casework in my office, because you know, our office has a lot of frustration with the immigration and citizenship file, and we're certainly very familiar with how long it can take to do a security check, and I understand the necessity of that. But there's probably a lot of families who are looking at this situation, who have gone through all of the formal procedures, done everything correctly, played by the rules, and they're still waiting, and yet they see this happen. So I guess, as a minister, this is your chance to take accountability, and what would you say to those families?
We're seeing, MP McGregor, an unprecedented volume of people that want to come to Canada. It's not a right, it's a privilege. And for those that successfully go through the comprehensive screening process, for whatever reason they're coming to Canada, whether it's just a visit or to become a permanent resident, and eventually a Canadian citizen, they do have to go through these processes, and we take them quite seriously. This is a service delivery ministry, and you know, when things go slowly, it's frustrating. When we're not in current processing time, it's frustrating. I can act sometimes in my role to see what's going on in individual files, and indeed with your interactions with my team, you've seen that we're quite responsive. But the one thing we won't compromise is the security checks. We will never get involved in fettering or waiving the work of our trained professionals to screen these people. And they have limited resources. And when there are limited resources and the volume that we're seeing, it does take time. Immensely frustrating for people who perhaps have no issues with their files, but it's something that I really can't fetter the discretion of our well-trained agents.
25 seconds.
I'm okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGregor. We'll start our second round of questions at this point with Ms. Landsman, please. 5 minutes.
Thanks for being here, Minister. Since our last meeting, another ISIS terrorist was arrested. A plot was foiled. You mentioned, you alluded to that in your opening commentary with Mr. Khan. You previously told Canadians that there was criminal background checks for temporary residents. There's actually no requirement for a police certificate. So I'm going to go back to that because you were very unclear. In 2018, the government removed, means it doesn't require the police background checks. That's police clearance certificates from some countries of origin. In the case that we're talking about, Pakistan is included in that, and it turns out that the student that your incompetent predecessor gave a visa to is part of that. You removed the security checks. Your government removed the security checks. Now, you know that this guy was arrested. You know that a terrorist plot was foiled with the help of U.S. intelligence. You know that he was off to Brooklyn to kill Jews. Have you removed or have you reinstated that requirement for security checks that you previously told Canadians that were in place?
Again, Mr. Chair, through you, I don't want to, in answer, give the impression that I'm validating a number of the facts that I cannot, or alleged facts that I cannot speak about publicly. I think my question to you, MP Landsman, is should we assume that were police certificates to have been attained, we would have apprehended this individual? We are confident in the way our biometric system works, in the progressive screening that operates in our country. And I think we should disabuse ourselves of the notion that Canada is hermetically sealed, and but for one procedure, we would have stopped something. It's highly theoretical. It's quite speculative.
It's actually not, Minister. I'm going to jump in because you require those police certificates for permanent residents. Now, Whether you know that or not, that's a fact and it's the case. So why wouldn't you require them for student visas? This is how this guy got in. You can ask your predecessor, Sean Fraser. He let him in. And I know that you're cleaning up a mess, and I know that you're cleaning up a mess where I think this government has ruined a generational consensus on immigration. But why do you take them for permanent residence and not student visas? Why is there a different security check if this is the terrorist plot that was foiled under this guy?
Not everyone that comes to this country is entitled to become a permanent resident of Canada or indeed a citizen. We take a progressive risk assessment approach. The approach works. I'm not saying it's perfect. And again, you're assuming a lot of facts that are not in evidence to draw a conclusion that may not have been.
What are you talking about? There was an arrest made for an ISIS plot of a terrorist that was about to kill people. The Minister of Public Safety, during the last time that happened, which was just weeks before that arrest, another 2 people were arrested. Guy was in an ISIS snuff video. He went through 6 different channels of immigration, 4 flags. He was checked 6 times by this country, and he was given a citizenship. Like, what on earth are you talking about? This is 2 terrorists. How can you assure Canadians that there are no more if you don't understand your own department?
Again, let me repeat, and I cannot deviate because, as you'll well appreciate, there is a criminal case.
You talked about it in your opening statement. I'm
Lansman?
asking you a
Ms.
question.
Lansman.
Well, you've introduced to this committee a number of alleged facts that I cannot speak to, and I
It's
don't
a
want
fact.
to
You lied about it on
necessarily-
TV.
Again, I
Ms.
think,
Lansman.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Lansman, this language is unparliamentary. I would ask you to
I will
apologize.
retract that. You misled Canadians about it on TV.
Again, Mr. Chair, through you, as indicated in the chronologies, I do want to speak to the decision-making of the officers in question that determined that there was no evidence presented to the decision-makers themselves at the time that would have rendered these individuals inadmissible.
So you're missing evidence. You don't require that evidence. Isn't the last thing or the least you can do is require that evidence, given that a terrorist plot was foiled? There has been 2 in the last month and a half. There has been 1 since Minister LeBlanc sat there and said the system is working as it should. Clearly, there's something wrong, and we have to make sure that you can assure Canadians that this won't happen again, and you've remedied nothing.
I'm failing to understand the argument. Is the argument that requiring police certificates would have dispensed of all the investigatory work and the work done by our officers to foil this plot? I would submit respectively, no.
We go now to Mr. Gahir. 5 minutes, please.
Great, thank you, Chair. And Minister, thank you for appearing before the committee. Immigration has certainly been in the news a lot for the past year. I think generally we do have a great immigration system, and tweaks are needed from time to time, and you're certainly making those tweaks now, and they're very welcome. I did want to ask about this particular case. And I do want to make the point that as an office that deals with a very high level of immigration work, that for every 1 individual that gains temporary access to Canada to visit, there are multiples more that are denied for the merits of the file itself. But I guess I want to ask, for cases where there is limited or unreliable data from the country of origin, how does your department handle that?
It really, I'm going to pass.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair, and through you, Minister Miller. So you're right that there are certain places where the information that may be available is less reliable. But our officers need to be satisfied that an individual is not inadmissible to Canada so that they don't pose any threat, they don't have any inadmissibilities. Working closely with our security partners, such as CBSA and CSIS, as well as our partnerships with our Five Eyes and other international partners, we're able to collect information that can help strengthen the inadmissibility assessment of any applicant. If the officer is not satisfied, they can continue to ask for more information. So for instance, they may require things such as police certificates, employment history, documents that will allow the officer to be satisfied that the individual does not pose a risk to Canada. In addition to that, we collect biometrics. And biometrics are an important part of the immigration system because it's not just for a security screening purpose where we're identifying if there's criminality, but it's also to anchor identity. So it's the first time we might see an individual, and using those biometrics and sharing those with our partners also helps us understand identity and determine if there's any derogatory information that exists on that individual.
Appel au règlement, Monsieur le Président. Merci.
Michaud, on a point of order.
Oui, juste avant que Monsieur.
Just before the minister gives the floor to the other, gave the floor, his mic was closed, so we did not get the French interpretation of his question. Could they please repeat so we could receive the interpretation?
Question and, repeat the answer.
You want me to be
French,
the,
the
you want me to
French
be the translation services?
I'm
glad to give it a go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Comme l'a dit ma collègue,
As my colleague said, there are lots of information that could be requested. What wasn't said in English that I will be adding is that we can also request interviews. If there are any risk indicators, we can request a police certificate. I'm not minimizing their importance, but I also don't want to go off on a tangent as your conservative colleagues did. If it requires more information, there are lots of ways of obtaining it. But I would like to underscore the fact that biometrics are very important, and it's a very reliable but not perfect way for us to verify and check people who want to come to Canada. We have access to the database of our partners in Canada and abroad. I did the best I could with the translation. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Gahir, I'll give you a few extra seconds.
Thank you, Chair. So, Minister, what about a case where, let's say, the individual in question does not have a criminal history, the biometrics come back clean, if there's an interview conducted, that interview is good, it seems like a decent person, but somewhere online, in the dark web, whatever that means, there's a video of them engaging in sort of these kinds of acts. Is it even theoretically possible to search? Millions of people want to come to this country, possibly billions, right? Is it even theoretically possible to search every single video and every single audio clip that's available online for every single individual that wants to come to Canada? Is that even theoretically possible?
I'd love to give you my answer on that, MP Gahir, but it really is up to our security services to speak to the nature and quality of that search. It is becoming increasingly, I think they would say, is becoming increasingly easier, but it's still something that is quite difficult and not necessarily routine, especially for clean matters with no flags.
Sure.
One more quick question to make up for the time that.
Sure. Do the officials have data on how many individuals are denied possibly every single month or in the past year?
We don't have it offhand, but we can provide it to the committee.
Sure. I'd like to see that just because it highlights just how strict our system is and how hard it actually is, despite people's feelings, how hard it is to get a visitor visa to come to Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gahir. On y va maintenant, Madame Michaud.
Ms. Michaud, 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Minister, I know that you'll be sending out findings on any feelings if they exist, what should be improved. I agree with what was said before. If there were 3 examples, there may be others, so this shows that there may be a loophole in the system. So it may be necessary to improve the security checking system. You talked about lateral cooperation. I noted that increasingly there are more permanent residents in Canada. The system is bogged down. And as I told my NDP colleague, in our ridings, we see this every day. We see citizens who've been waiting for a response on their files for years, and it's difficult for us to tell them what to do. It's a complicated and rigorous process, we do know, but when we see cases like this one, we think it may be necessary for the system to stay rigorous. So, what is your observation today? I don't know if you could tell us more. Do you have the intention to improve the security system? Luckily, a disaster was avoided thanks to our police services and the CSI and CSIS. What can be done to improve the immigration system if there's a failing? Let me know what you think. I would not conclude that we are not doing what we need to do now. Criminal associations are very sophisticated, and we need to adjust every time. And things are being done gradually, internally within my department, and also within the security agencies. If there's need for change, you will be notified in the coming weeks. But of course, we need to stay alert. Canada is not the only country that is dealing with such threats. It's become clear. I know it's not reassuring, but this, if I said this was an exception to the rule, if there's a disaster, we are all responsible, particularly if somebody loses their life. So I would like to congratulate the security agencies who interfered in time. So, but I'm not totally satisfied with the situation. Thank you.
Now to Mr. McGregor, 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister Miller, I did take note of your comment that there is no compromise on security. Absolutely. I was just curious though, because in your department's most recent annual report, there is reference to automation technologies being used to help streamline. Are any of those automation technologies do they ever intersect with the security screening? And do you have any concerns that that might lead to a gap in the future?
When it comes to automation, I think the clear conclusion is that it can in no time be a shortcut to any matters of security, particularly those of national security. I think they aim to speed up the process for sure, but without compromising these strict security parameters. And I think that's something that we have to constantly adjust and adapt to, particularly with the looming use and leveraging of AI in people seeking to come into this country. I think that's a worry that we are looking at and need to be ready for. This is a department that was criticized, I think rightly, for doing a lot by hand. That human aspect can make some errors, but I think the automation can also make some as well.
I want to get one more in. I think the information leading to the LTD arrest may have come from French intelligence, and hopefully one day Canada can return the favor and provide intelligence to our allies that prevents a terror attack abroad. But from your position as a Minister of Immigration, I know there's still an internal review going on, but are you fairly satisfied that our international information sharing, particularly amongst our allies, is as robust as it could be?
I don't think anyone in my position can ever be satisfied. I am confident, though, and with significant confidence, that our information agencies are doing their utmost to share. The sharing of information is critical. If we don't have that information, we can't cross-correlate, can't verify. And in order to draw a conclusion in this specific case, you would have to put into evidence a number of facts that would, qualify why a particular agency may have had some information that was shared, and why perhaps we didn't have it. Again, so it's hard to speculate on that openly currently. But again, looking at the set of facts, I'm confident that we acted quickly and that we did the right thing.
Thank you, Mr. McGregor. So, Minister, you've been here an hour. I'm wondering if we have a 5-minute slot and a 5-minute slot. I wonder if we can prevail upon you to stay for those?
I have a competing engagement. So I
You're
can't.
unable?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Well, thank you, Minister, for being here. And in that case, we'll suspend and bring in the next panel.